Welcome back, guys. We are live with another episode of CarBiz Leaders Live featuring the principal's office. I like to say this is the only principal's office where you actually would like to go to. We are talking to car dealers, owners of businesses, high level people, gurus, people who really know their stuff. And I am so fortunate today that I have a very special guest for you, Tom Klein, Better Vantage Solutions, and he can correct me because I'm getting it wrong today, but he is doing amazing thing for dealerships. He's been in the business. His family's been in the car business since 1925. They really know their stuff. And I just can't wait for you to meet him and for us to discuss all the wonderful things that he has experienced and that can bring to you guys, as well as, the challenges, successes, and what he brings to the table. So without further ado, let's get this party started. And here we go with another episode of Car Biz Leaders Live. Let's do this. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Tom Klein. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Hey, Rachel. Great to be here. Thanks for having me here on CarBiz Leaders Live. I said it fast. And said it right.
I know. Oh, I just want to thank you so much for your patience with me. I get some things wrong sometimes. I'm not a perfect person, but I am trying to build a good business for you. And I'm so glad that you agreed. Now, when I read one of your posts online, I thought, oh, I got to be connected with this guy. It was epic. And I just want you to kind of introduce yourself like you did to me on your post, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. I'm Tom Klein. So I've been in the car business 34 years now. My family's been in the car business, you said, before I came on, since 1925, so almost 100 years. And after we sold our dealerships in 2019, I started my boutique consulting firm, which is called Better Vantage Point. And what we do is help dealerships, other businesses, and startups in risk mitigation. And the way I like to describe what risk mitigation is, if you imagine trying to tuck an octopus into bed, which is why I have an octopus over my shoulder. If you imagine trying to tuck an octopus in bed and the tentacles keep falling all over the place, that's what it's like to run a business, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. And as I read on a meme this morning, the benefits of owning a business is you get to choose which 80 hours a week you get to work, right?
Only 80? Come on.
Only 80. Part-time. But what I do is I tuck those tentacles in by anticipating problems and what might be catastrophic problems to your business. And we put in solutions to make sure that that doesn't happen. And so I go to businesses every month routinely, and I have dealerships as an example that I've been working with for years, and we're tracking 250 or 300 items that we're working on all simultaneously. So there's a lot of triaging going on, and there's a lot of determining what risk that dealership has and why they have risk, and then what to do about it. So that I'm the guy who, as it says over my other shoulder, who tucks the octopus into bed and to make sure everything is copacetic.
Yes, and I think that is so important because one of my favorite quotes is actually hanging in my office where you can't see, was Warren Buffett, and says risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. And
Absolutely.
like I said before when we were kind of prepping for our show today, there's not enough time in the day for everybody to be an expert at everything. And certainly you don't know what you don't know. So what are some of the things that people like don't know that are sort of like these, I call it little death traps, right? Like,
Sure.
that's bad. Is there a couple things that are really important that people like really need to be aware of so they can be more successful in their dealership?
Yeah, so I would start with two questions actually. So when a lot of business owners tell me what keeps them awake at night, right? And so whatever that thing is that keeps you awake, that's where you should start and figure out how you can solve that problem. And
Okay.
if you don't know how to solve that problem, start asking. I get calls for all kinds of things. Sometimes it's my area, sometimes it's not, and I can refer it to other people because I have lots of course, colleagues in the industry. But if you've got a problem that's keeping you awake or you're concerned about, start by trying to fix that one thing. And then once you fix that one thing, then we can go to the next thing and then the next one. So that would be item one. Item two is, and one thing that entrepreneurs, not just dealers, but entrepreneurs have trouble with is what kind of insurance do they have and why do they have it? And do they have enough? Do they have the right insurance? Do they have the wrong insurance? Do they have enough insurance? What does your policy say, right? Nobody loves to wake up in the morning and read their insurance policy. It's not exciting, but it
And it's
is
expensive.
it is work that needs to be done, right? And so that's one of the things. One of the things I do is I'll read those insurance policies and see what they say. As an
Okay, I'm
example,
sending mine over right away.
send it over. That's right. I'll give you one example of a really egregious problem that this dealership owner didn't know he had in his
Yeah.
insurance policy. So he had a cyber insurance policy, which of course protects against hackers and people who freeze you
Mhm.
out, and there's a whole list of perils. But for purposes of conversation, we'll just say that he had a cyber policy. And in the cyber policy, there was an exclusion, which means that if this happens, then the insurance company's not going to pay. And that exclusion said that essentially that if the hacker comes from a hostile nation to the United States, that this insurance company wasn't going to pay the claim. So if the hacker comes from Russia or North Korea or Iran or any of the countries that China that might
Mhm.
be considered hostile to the United States, the insurance company wasn't going to pay. And when I brought this up to the underwriter with the dealer, all of a sudden, because of the timing of it, we flipped into the new policy year, and they changed that exclusion.
Wonderful. Thank God.
But this dealer was spending nearly $20,000 on a year for a policy that wasn't really a policy. It was, I don't know what you call that, but I don't call it good. And so it's important to know what's in your policies, and that's of course your first line of defense when you have a catastrophic problem is how do you handle it and what is your insurance policy and how is it going to respond?
Yeah, and sometimes when, for as a business owner like myself, like I mean, I'm sifting through hundreds of emails a day. There's not enough time to get everything done. You're just, all right, peruse, 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 fingers crossed. And even if you do have somebody who, that may not be that is really data entry, that's detail oriented, doesn't know how to look for these, what I call death traps, right?
Right.
What are some of the things that so were you able to then save them money on that policy then or bring immediate value?
So in that particular case, I went through an hour
Mhm.
with the underwriter, with the dealer on the phone, and asked a series. I think there were 29 or 36 questions, uh, some of which they could answer, and some of which actually they couldn't answer. But the value I brought there, of course, is what's in the policy and why is it important, and which parts didn't have enough coverage. We we added some other coverages and increased the limits, and we talked about all of those things. So yes, I was able to add a lot of value there, and
Wonderful.
that's important. That's important,
Yeah,
and to
and
bring.
it
Go
really
ahead.
is. Well, I was just gonna say it's so important because we just don't have the time or even the knowledge to know which questions to ask. Like I wouldn't know where to begin. I know the questions I need to ask for my particular business, but if it's out of my realm or not my expertise, then I could ask a couple of those good questions, but I wouldn't get the thoroughness that you bring.
Sure. I mean, for example, bringing your business into it, when a dealership is shipping a load of cars,
Hmm.
and on their policy, now cars have gone up in price tremendously, right?
Right.
So average car hauler has how many cars?
9 or 10.
Okay, so let's say 10 for round numbers and easy math. So an
Hmm.
average car I read last week is used or new is like $49,000.
Yeah.
So in the event the hauler doesn't have insurance, does the dealership have $500,000 limits on that particular part of their policy so that they're covered,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
That's an example where you want to make sure. And if you're shipping a whole load of Corvettes, you have to check and see what the maximum value is on that load. Excuse me, because sometimes they'll cap that, right? They'll
Yep.
cap the amount of any one vehicle. So considering whatever the kind of business the dealer's business is, if you're shipping Bentleys, that's certainly something you need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
If it's used cars you're buying at the auction, it might not. But that's one example, and it's a very
Mhm.
small example of what dealers should be
Yeah.
paying attention to in their insurance.
Exactly. And sometimes, and that's why my company has like additional insurance. So we use the driver's insurance. And then if their insurance isn't mine, then kicks in, you
Sure,
know. But it's still like I was just squawking and screaming, like because most of the time we don't have to, but I still have to pay. I have to shell out,
a lot.
like $25,000. So we have this additional protection for our customers, and there's a lot of guys out there that want to, get their own trucking company or send drivers, and that all that's great. You get the time thing, but then if something were to happen when you put your whole dealership at risk,
That's
you
right.
know,
That's
and
right. I
then
mean, to
mhm,
use an example, when we owned the store, we had a car hauler that was on public property,
mhm,
that was leaking. I think it was antifreeze, as I recall. It might have been oil, but
mhm,
one or the other, and it was leaking onto the public pavement. Well, because they were hauling cars for us, we had to get involved. We had to get our pollution carrier involved. But just to clean up that one car hauler's antifreeze, I recall the bill was 27 or $28,000
oh my lord, that's
because
expensive.
you have to remediate it properly. You can't just take cat litter out there and throw it down, and you've got to do it right. And so pollution coverage becomes really important, in a case like that.
Now, I know that are you affiliated with a lot of different insurance companies then, or do you have partnerships? Like how, let's say, um, or do you just work with what people have? Because that might be an idea for you, is to have partnerships with people you've kind of vetted and offer them, just my opinion, just as we're talking, I'm like, that might be a good idea for you. Um, just people you vetted that are legit because people don't even know who the good, they're just like, oh, you know, what I run into is people are always looking for the cheapest, the cheapest, not necessarily the best,
Right.
necessarily the people that's going to get it done,
Right.
but they're like, oh, okay, I found the cheapest cost and I'm going to check out the box.
Right. And the cheapest is not going to, the coverages are just not going to be as good. But to answer your question, as a consultant, I don't take any commissions from anybody. And
Sure.
so, and so I do have some folks who I know, who I trust,
Yeah.
who do a good job. But I usually start with whatever the dealer or the business's own insurance agent. And we
Yeah.
start there and have conversation and see if there's enhancements and other things. I mean, I had one dealer who called me 3 weeks before their renewal and said, "Can you help me? What can you do for me?" In that particular case, I was able to identify 108 questions, of which turned into a $29,000 annual savings for that
That's
dealer.
amazing. That's
So,
amazing.
and we then took 8,000 of that 29 and bought enhanced coverages where I thought
Okay.
some of his numbers were low, but we still saved him 21,000 a year.
Right.
Now, is that typical? Can't tell you what's typical because every dealer has such a variety
Different
of
things.
different
Exactly.
insurances, and so there is
Mhm.
no typical. Is really when it comes to insurance.
When you're working with a dealership, like how do you begin? How does that work? Like how do you just sit down and just kind of do an assessment? I mean, I know you talked about what keeps you up at night. Money always keeps me up at night. There's
Right.
never
Let's.
enough of it, and
That's right. Well,
are we
well,
doing a good enough job? And but seriously, money keeps me up at night.
Well, running any business, it's not about how much money you make, it's about how much money you keep,
Right.
right? And so you could sell however much it is, but if it's going into problems and other things going out the back door, you're like a hamster on a treadmill.
Right.
Um, but to answer your question, where I start, I really start with two different things. First thing I do is for example, I visited a Nissan store last week,
Mhm.
and I started with their website.
Okay.
Most websites I can find lots of advertising violations just by going on and doing a quick audit. So when I sit down with a dealer initially, I'll go through all the website problems that I see and find.
Okay.
And I usually find 5 or 6 or 7 at a minimum.
Right.
Sometimes a lot more than that. And some of them really huge exposures. So class action exposures. And I'm not sure if everyone knows what a class action is, but a class action is when you have one person who goes to complain to an attorney and they become representative of a class where everybody who ever bought a car, if they have the same problem, that person would be representative, and you would have to deal with that attorney on hundreds or thousands of customers who have bought cars. So I see problems on website that open up dealers for class action exposure. So that's one place I start. And the second place I start is by really doing a simple math equation where I
Mhm.
ask the dealer to say, how much is your land and building worth? How much is your blue sky worth? How much is your parts inventory and your used car inventory that's not floor planned? How
Mhm.
much is all that worth? And do you have that number in your head? And don't tell me the number, and I'll tell you a quick story about that in a second.
Mhm.
And I said, now, how much liability insurance do you have? Because
Mhm.
if those numbers don't match or you have a little bit more liability insurance, then you're underinsured. And what that means is that if your lot porter hits a school bus and you get sued because by all all the parents of the school bus, if you don't have enough money to cover your assets, if you don't have enough insurance to cover all your assets, then subsequent to the insurance, they're going to actually come after the dealership, and they're going to go after the dealership's assets. And that's where you really have a
Mhm.
big problem. As an
Mhm.
example, I had a dealer from Philadelphia who called me, who'd been in business for a minute. And I went through that. And after I said, so do you have enough insurance? And he said, point well taken. He said, I got $50 million worth of assets. I said, okay, well, then you should have a high number for, for your liability, because if somebody sues you, you're exposed if you're not insured up to that $50 million. And of course, some dealers don't want to spend the money because they don't see the value in having insurance, because it hasn't happened yet. I call that I call that a case of the yets. Don't get a case of the yets, because it happens to someone all the time.
Right.
But those are the first two things: is the website, and do you have enough liability insurance? Because we want to make sure that dealers are compliant, right? Part of my job is compliance, right? Governance, risk, and compliance is what I do overall. Right. And so compliance is a big portion of that.
I like to make a joke. The government does not care whether you know it or not.
That's right.
If you didn't know, they don't care. They still want their money.
That's right.
They don't care if you didn't know. Well, I didn't know. Well, we don't care.
That's right.
Pay up. We want our check.
I wrote an article a couple of months ago called "Let the Government Be Your Customer Service Department."
I love that line, by the way.
And what the article says is, if you're not taking care of customer problems on the internet, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau or the Federal Trade Commission starts hearing your customers complaining to them, then they're going to get involved and they're going to tell you what to do. And I've got so many examples historically and of recent history where the government just comes in and says, here's what you're going to do. And they tell you what you're going to do. In some cases, they will tell you what you have to do for a period of 20 years. It's called a consent order. And a consent order, if you're not doing what you're supposed to, you're required to do what the government tells you for a period of 20 years.
Shoot, I haven't even been in business that long. Shoot. 20 years.
20 years. So, and that's if you're not doing good things, right? I mean, you've got to be a bad actor, but there are a lot of bad actors out there. Now, there are a lot of great dealers who are trying to do great things for their community and trying to do it right. But as you just said, ignorance is no excuse. So they don't care if you haven't done your due diligence, or they don't care if you're not working on the new Graham-Leach-Bliley safeguards rule. These are things that you need to know and need to be working on.
Awesome. Well, I'm so grateful, because I think more and more people need to be aware of these things, and then I know that you've been in the auto world, but I could use your help too.
Okay. No,
so many business owners.
I do work for nonprofits. I do work for startups and technology companies. The bulk of my business is for the dealerships, but I also do have clients in those other areas.
Well, it helps too if that's your background too. And I of course, there's so many people out there that could. I just see it now. I'm like, oh my God. Because the last thing you want is a class action lawsuit. The last thing you want is to hand over your business to the government. The last thing you want is to be told what to do. I mean, that's why I started my own business, is I didn't want to be told what to do,
right.
And, when it comes to the government, though, you don't have a choice. You got to do what they say.
And you can work the 80 hours that you want to work.
Right. Right. So one of the things I wanted, just because we're going to get close here on time, we're going to do some fun things. Okay. We're going to call it the rapid fire. We're going to talk about, your car business and just fun little short questions. So when you were selling cars, did you ever sell cars, first of all?
Yes.
Okay. So what was your record month in selling cars?
I think 15.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Second question. Are you a white guy?
Yes.
No, what is favorite color of car? I'm a white girl. So
favorite color of car would be orange first and orange. Like royal blue second, kind of the blue in Better Vantage. That kind of blue.
I love it. Favorite classic car? if you have one?
The 59 Lincoln with the suicide doors.
Oh, so cool. So cool. And if you could go back in time or and have dinner with anybody, who would it be and why?
Oh gosh, my wife asked me
Dinner,
this
lunch,
question.
breakfast, coffee. Sorry.
She asked
I
me
meant
that
that.
question recently, and I'm not sure what the answer is.
Well, you can give two. Would you be better if you had two choices? You could have like a group dinner.
A group dinner. I don't know. Maybe I really enjoy being out on the water and have admired a lot of the early explorers and then some of the later ones too. But so let's just say for today, let's say Christopher Columbus, because
Uh-huh.
having the guts to get on a ship and figure out celestial navigation and all that he had to do to make it back and forth is incredible. And there was a guy named Mike Plant who
Okay.
died a number of years ago, many years ago now, actually, who was an around the world racer. And
Oh.
at one time, I considered being a solo racer, a sailor to sail around the world. There was a race at that time called the British Oxygen Challenge, and
Oh,
this guy was
cool.
he was a very fascinating guy. He's somebody who I think would be really fun to have dinner with. So I'm going to go with those two for today. If you ask me tomorrow, I might have a different answer.
Okay, that's totally fine. Everybody changes. So you said you like the water. What are you like a boater? Do you like the jet
Boater,
ski? What the boater? Okay.
boater, yeah, yeah.
I take invitations to the boat. No.
I'm I'm boatless right now, but I'll keep you in mind when yeah, it's tough being boatless.
I always say you don't want to buy a boat. You just need a friend with a boat. Um, I'm always looking for friends with boats.
Yes.
All right. So final advice to our viewers out there. Final advice.
Yeah, my final advice would be think about what think about what I'll call the what ifs. Think about kind of look around your business and think about what is the worst things that can happen. And while it's not a pleasant exercise to go through, it's a really important one because then by identifying those risks and by identifying what your concerns are, you can then begin to construct an answer to how to deal with that kind of problem. Just to, as you know, as a quick answer, like what happens if the local media shows up? How would I handle that, right? If you're a
Right.
dealership, because one of your customers' cars has been in the service department for a year or whatever it is, right? You wouldn't want your lot porter going, yeah, Mrs. Jones's car has been in the back for a good year now. I don't know what's going on. That's not what you want. So
Yeah.
when you
We
think
don't want
about
you on Fox 2 problem solvers, okay?
you, you want to control the narrative of that, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I use having a media policy as a really accessible answer to that because you want to control the narrative. So go around your business and think about what your biggest concerns are, and then you can start to address them. You can start to construct policies or procedures or find insurance or whatever it is that'll help you minimize that risk and minimize the number of problems. Businesses running a business is about figuring out problems, right? And that's what I do is I fix problems. And so for your viewers, if anybody has any problems they're concerned about, call me for a freebie. I'll be glad to get their call
Thank you so much.
and just answer the question. I had a dealer call me very briefly 2 months ago. We had some communication. In short, I solved a $250,000 problem in about 5 minutes. It was a really a simple fix because I knew what the answer was.
Right.
And sometimes it goes that way. Sometimes it takes a long slog to get it done.
Well, Tom, I can't thank you enough and please, please, please take advantage of Tom and his offer for all you guys that are watching out there who own businesses. Okay, let's protect ourselves. Let's make sure that we are mitigating our risk and that we don't end up on Fox 2 problem solvers or in a class action lawsuit. I cannot thank you for your time. Please, if you get a moment to like, subscribe, share this, please share. This is important information that everybody could really use. All right. Tom, I can't thank you enough for your time. Next week, we have Mark Wada from Street Smart Automotive. He's also really big in the Colorado chapter of NIADA. This is going to be an exciting show coming up, so please stay tuned for that. And we'll keep rock and rolling. Tom, honestly, you're just the nicest, smartest man I've ever met. I really enjoyed our conversation today, and I hope you all did too. So thank you so much. And please like, subscribe, share, and have a great day. Enjoy. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.